Here's a fun question to think about on a Saturday morning. How do you defeat a god? At first, it might seem impossible because gods are often thought of as immortal. In many modern fantasy stories, gods are portrayed as unkillable as long as people believe in them, but they fade away if people stop believing. But actually, in ancient myths, gods die quite often. The issue is, they usually come back to life somehow. If a god is killed by something like mistletoe or torn apart, they often just come back later or become a god of death in the underworld. Killing a god doesn't usually make them stop being a god. Different mythologies have different views on gods and death. For example, in Greek mythology, gods don't worry much about getting old or dying, and even if they're harmed, it's not a big deal to them. On the other hand, Egyptian gods do have stories where they die, but they usually come back to life. Interestingly, there are tales of Egyptian gods growing old, like Ra becoming too old to rule and passing on his duties to someone else. Now, when it comes to gods who seem more vulnerable to being killed, Norse gods take the spotlight. It's important to note that most of what we know about Norse mythology comes from texts written after Christianity replaced Norse religion, so the Norse gods weren't worshipped anymore. One of the main sources of Norse myths is Snorri Sturluson's Prose Edda, written in Iceland around the early 1200s. Interestingly, Sturluson seemed to downplay the power of Norse gods, suggesting they were actually just people from the Trojan War whom Europeans mistakenly believed to be gods. However, when Sturluson tells the actual myths, he portrays the gods as divine beings, not just ordinary humans. It's worth noting that many of these Norse myths were recorded with hindsight, and often with an attempt to make the gods seem more relatable or human-like. It's interesting that one of the most famous stories in Norse mythology is about Ragnarok, the end of the world where the gods face their demise. This suggests that even before Christianity, Norse gods weren't thought of as immortal. And today, we're going to talk about a time when Loki almost caused a big problem for everyone. But it's not the big disaster yet, just a close call. Ragnarok is still a while away. It's like tea time for the gods. Our story starts with Odin, Loki, and another guy wandering through the wilderness. They're hungry, so they decide to kill an ox and cook it. However, when they try to cook it, the meat doesn't cook properly. They realize that something magical is stopping it from cooking, and they find out it's an eagle perched on a nearby tree. The eagle demands a share of the meat before they can cook it properly. Reluctantly, the trio agrees, but they soon regret it when the eagle takes all the best parts of the cow and flies away. Loki, feeling especially angry, hits the eagle with a stick, but it turns out to be a bad move. The stick gets stuck, and the eagle flies off, dragging Loki and slamming him into rocks and trees. After Loki has had enough of being tossed around, the eagle tells him the only way to stop is if Loki helps him. He wants Loki to lure the goddess Idun out of Asgard, along with her magical apples that keep the gods young. Loki agrees. On the agreed-upon day, Loki tricks Idun by telling her he found apples like hers in the wild and she should come check them out. While she's distracted, the eagle swoops down and kidnaps her. Loki realizes the eagle is actually the giant Thiazi in disguise. Without Idun and her apples, the gods start aging rapidly. They realize Idun is missing and suspect Loki's involvement. They confront him and threaten him until he agrees to help fix the situation. Loki borrows Freya's feather cloak, transforms into a falcon, and flies to Jotunheim to rescue Idun. Luckily, Thiazi isn't home, so Loki quickly transforms Idun and the apples into a small nut and flies away. However, Thiazi returns home and realizes Idun is gone. He transforms into an eagle and chases after Loki, causing a huge storm. The gods in Asgard see Loki's distress and decide to help him. They build a big fire behind the walls of Asgard. When Loki flies over, he safely lands inside, but Thiazi, as a giant eagle, can't stop and crashes into the fire. With Thjazi defeated and Idun rescued, the gods celebrate their victory with epic levels of bloodshed worthy of a heavy metal album cover. Idun is restored to her rightful place among the gods. Thanks to her magical apples, everyone regains their youth and vitality, ready to face whatever challenges lie ahead, even if it's the end of the world in a week or two. Because hey, if you're going out in an epic apocalypse, you might as well look good doing it, right? In the end, the gods come out victorious, thanks to teamwork and a bit of divine intervention. And with that, the gods can continue their eternal struggle, knowing they have each other's backs.